So welcome back to another edition of the Hart2Heart podcast. And my guest today is Dr. Simon Goddek. So Dr. Simon Goddek has a PhD in biotechnology, and we're here today to discuss science, discuss COVID, and discuss a lot of things. So thanks so much for coming on the show, Simon. And if you can just introduce yourself for the audience, that'd be perfect.
Oh yeah, hey, thanks for having me. I'm Simon. I'm from Germany and the Netherlands. I'm living in the Netherlands and Brazil right now. And I worked as a researcher at the university, and I will start another job very soon, also as a researcher. My background is biotechnology, and with a hard focus on system dynamics. I work with aquaponics. I work with agricultural systems, but also with the metabolism of fish, of human beings, etc. So my field of science is very broad.
Sounds like you have a lot of knowledge on physiology in general of the human body, and we only had one brief conversation before chatting today, but we chatted a lot about cortisol and immune systems and gut health, and it seems to be that those are sort of some of your knowledge of expertise lies in those fields. And I thought maybe before we got into COVID and some of the questions I have for you on that, like maybe we could just chat about like science in general, and where is it going, and why has it gotten away from us, so to speak. Why are there so many scientists and doctors who are saying things that are basically not scientific, and also why there's so many physicians and doctors that are unwilling to really say the true science these days. And unfortunately, it kind of seems like a lot of the science these days is a little bit of a lost art, and I can understand the public now being concerned and getting frustrated sometimes with listening to medical experts or scientific experts on certain subjects, just because there's so much confliction in the news these days. And do you find that basically you're having the same issues in the Netherlands as we are here in North America? Because in North America, I mean, Fauci says one thing one day, and then he says almost the exact opposite the next day. And it's certainly going on in Ontario now. We were told that we weren't gonna be closing schools, and all of a sudden schools are closed again. So what's kind of going on in the science world, Simon?
You perfectly described the principle of gaslighting. So I think it's not even a coincidence. So we have the same over here. We have people like in Holland, like Marion Koopmans, in Germany, Christian Drosten. They tend to say one thing and the next day another one. For example, masks. Drosten said several times in 2014 or beginning even of 2020, like, oh, masks don't work. Don't worry about this. Masks will not work. They will most likely do harm than work. And at some point he said again, okay, masks work. Everyone should wear a mask. But then he was at some parliament, and he had to answer questions from the people sitting in the parliament. And then he said again, like, okay, most likely they don't work. So he says A and then B and then A and then B, and he tends to like kind of confuse the public. And as I said, it's like gaslighting. People tell you one thing, then they tell you the opposite, then one thing again, then again the opposite. So it lets people in kind of a very insecure state, and they don't know what to believe anymore. So this is what we see a lot. And you also mentioned science. And I mean, for me, there is nothing like there's this science. It's always told by the media, oh, we have to believe in this science. But the science which they kind of refer to is a trademark. It's like a trademark science, a trademark of the media. It's our science. It's our handful of scientists who believe this one thing, who tells you what to believe. And I think science in general has a very high degree of plurality. So if I sit in a room with 10 scientists, we all have different thoughts on issues. And I think sitting together and discussing this, that's like the real science. A, is it really true that that A causes B? And people say, hey, but there are some intervening factors. Let's talk about them. So to kind of figure out what's the truth, because there is no truth, there is just like something getting close to the truth, but there is no real truth. And this is what we have to understand. And what's media trying to tell us is that, okay, this is the truth. And it's not the case. It's just not the case. And these people who are in the media, be it Fauci, be it Drosten, or be it like all these other fearmongers and all the other countries in the world, they all do the same. And that's highly worrying.
Yeah, I think what happens too is, you have 2 or 3 so-called, experts, in the medical field, saying something. And then because, it's not just one person, it's 3 or 4 of them, saying these things, then people tend not to really question science or look into it, themselves. So like, oh, if Dr. Fauci says it, and then if, Dr. So-and-so and Dr. So-and-so and my friend and my brother, well, everyone around me is saying this. So, I'm not going to look into, the science myself. And I'm just going, and when someone asks me, like, do you believe in a mask, or do you believe in, the vaccine, or whatever it is? It's like, well, instead of, saying something scientific, the response is like, well, this is what so-and-so said and what, Dr. So-and-so said. So, that's why I believe it. But we know that that's not how, the scientific method works. And I know that you had a graph on your Twitter lately that went, pretty viral. I think it got like 1 million views or something, you said. And, it looked at, pseudoscience versus, evidence-based, and how we've kind of gotten away from it, and how, like, just like questioning things now these days is almost like not allowed. But, that's the whole, scientific method is, proposing a hypothesis and then questioning it. It's not scientific to just, take what other people have to say and then, not look at the evidence behind it. And was that sort of, the purpose of the graph that you put out? And I should just note too that I'm pretty jealous of Dr. Slamden's Twitter feed. He's got 25,000 followers, and he's had the account for about 4 months, which is pretty impressive. But getting back to that graph, Simon, can you just explain, what you were kind of the point you were trying to convey when you put out that graph of pseudoscience versus evidence-based medicine or scientific medicine?
Yes, of course. The tweet went further. It went into eugenics, and I made a comparison. So how kind of a state of pseudoscience is created, and I clearly explained that I think it's a bit odd that there are scientists who take a step back from the field of evidence-based science, but they call those who are actually evidence-based scientists, they call them conspiracy theorists or pseudoscientists or whatever. We've seen this lately, especially on Twitter where I'm active, that there are several studies, be this on wearing masks or lockdowns, which are peer-reviewed, which are conducted by scientists without conflict of interest. And they are being banned. So if you want to tweet about them and you post the link to the Lancet, to Nature, to whatever, I mean, like these are no journals which have a very low impact factor and are suspicious. We talk about very, let's say, high impact journals. And if you want to post a link to these studies, Twitter blocks it. So you can't post a link to these studies. You can't refer to these studies. And the same goes with the scientists who are on the other side. So my colleague Kevin McKernan, who's also on Twitter, he has looked into I think it's called the Jon Snow Declaration. Is this Jon Snow? I don't know. it's the opposite of the Great Barrington Declaration. So it's like many scientists are writing a paper on why we should increase lockdowns, why we should increase measures, why COVID is so dangerous. And then we looked into, hey, who are all these? I think it was 25 authors. and more than 8% of them received money from Bill Gates, from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So to me, we have to see it like this. So you have scientists who go totally with the narrative, but they receive money from the guy who likes this narrative, who profits from this narrative. And of course, they also then kind of represent the story of the guy who finds them. I'm not saying that everybody of them isn't convinced of what they're saying, but I think that these conflict of interests are somehow heavy. And if then these scientists who are part of this paper call, for example, Martin Kulldorff, who is part of the Great Barrington Declaration, when they call him pseudoscientists, and they say, oh, whatever he is saying, it's a lie, or what he's saying is fake news, then I'm highly worried. I'm highly worried about scientific integrity, and that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we have it here in Canada, as well. I mean, I tweeted out yesterday, and my guest that I dropped the podcast with today, Dr. Patrick Phillips, he's been tweeting about ivermectin and some other treatments for COVID, and particularly the one that gets me is vitamin D. And still in Canada, they say that there's insufficient evidence to recommend vitamin D for any stage of COVID. Yet there's studies that show that over 80%, nearly 90% actually, of patients who get hospitalized or who die from COVID are vitamin D deficient.
Yes, I know. I've written a publication, a peer-reviewed publication with vitamin D and K2 with respect to COVID. It got published in August. I got a handful of citations, which is nice, but not the most important thing. But what's crazy is that I was heavily attacked for this. So my university received email. People are saying, "Look at this conspiracy theorist. That's witchcraft," and whatever. And they even the journal who published my this publication, they received mails that I'm have conflict of interest because I was selling vitamin D products, which is not true. I mean, now I'm planning to do so, but back then I wasn't even thinking about it. It was just like I came across and I was writing a review paper, and I was explaining them metabolic pathways of why vitamin D3 can actually support to solve this COVID issue, and there's a website vdmeta.com, and they show all the studies, and they made a meta-analysis, and just shows that people who aren't deficient, and then again we have to talk about what's deficiency, but people who have a higher blood serum level of vitamin D of I think 50 nanogram per milliliter, they don't die. They hardly die. I mean, it's a survival rate. It goes up by more than tenfold. And then we have to ask ourselves, hey, how can this be? And how is it possible? Now we get to a point that there is a publication that says, hey, vitamin D doesn't help. It really doesn't help. And all these particular scientists or the media, who's always been against vitamin D, who are always just pushing the vaccine. They say, hey, there is a study, there's a study. It shows vitamin D doesn't work. They ignore all the other 30, 40, 50 studies. But this one, they said, like, look, there is evidence. I looked into the study and it was ridiculous. So what they actually did, they said, like, okay, if someone has 20 nanogram per milliliter, that's sufficient. So they put the threshold there, or even. And I think the average of the people who were deficient had like 15 and sufficient like 23, and it's hardly any difference. And they said, look, there's no difference. And all these I call them scientist trolls. I mean, they're scientists, but they published about this the same time. Their tweets like, hey, look at this, vitamin D doesn't work, and I got lots of response of these people, of the followers of these people, and they said, hey, Simon, you see, witchcraft doesn't work. And I'm attacked heavily for my view on vitamin D, but I'm convinced it's that I'm right. And even if you look like into the studies until 2019, there is no study saying vitamin D doesn't work, vitamin D doesn't support the immune system. It's just a novel thing. It's that people try to tell us the vitamin D isn't that important. It is more important to wear masks, to stay inside, to stop doing sports, to take experimental drugs, etc. But back in the time, everybody knew vitamin D was important. Even, for example, during the time of the Spanish flu. So what did they do with the patients? They took them outside. They took them outside and let them lay in the sun the whole day because they knew this is going to work. They didn't. I mean, and nowadays they tell us, okay, it's witchcraft.
And is there something else too besides, obviously, everyone knows that we can get vitamin D from the sun, but is there something else that the sun is doing that's beneficial for COVID specifically, or even for our health in general that is not attributed to vitamin D from the sun?
I don't know. I don't know. I think the main factor is vitamin D. Of course, if you're in the sun, you're outside, you move, you don't sit,
Yeah.
Sitting is the new smoking. So whenever you're outside in the sun, you most likely don't sit. So that's, of course, a good point. Otherwise, sun is life. Sun lets plants grow. Sun gives you vitamin D. So I mean, yeah. And the whole chain of vitamin D production, even for fatty fish, it's very important. The sun's important.
Okay. And then, taking a look at maybe, some other factors that aren't really discussed in terms of, making sure your immune system is strong and is not susceptible to COVID. Like I know, Sam, you've done quite a bit of work on cortisol, also some work on gut health. So, if you could, well, I was going to say quickly, but probably not too quickly, explain a little bit, how we can take care of our gut health and how that is effective in maintaining our immune system and maintaining our defense against COVID.
Yeah, of course. Let me just open my file here because it gives me a very nice overview. You're free to post it on your website too. So I made something called a causal loop diagram. It's a diagram of many factors with arrows going forth and back, just to see what are the connections between different variables, between different factors. For example, we know that cortisol is a stress hormone. So stress causes higher cortisol levels in your body. And what causes stress? Anxiety causes stress. Not doing sports causes stress. Even eating unhealthy causes stress in your body. So whenever you now order your pizza at Papa John's or Domino's every evening, it raises your cortisol level in your blood. And cortisol is known as the silent killer. It doesn't kill you right away, but in mid and long-term effects, it really has. And I think I've tweeted about this, but I don't have the numbers in my head. But I thought that the mortality was increased by up to 18% by just elevated cortisol levels. So then we talk about when the whole media worldwide, is causing panic by saying, hey, we have a deadly virus. The survival rate for all the people is low. If you see other people with a mask, they could infect you. You could kill your own parents. They tell us, oh, don't go to Granny. Don't visit Granny during Christmas. You might kill her. So this causes stress, and there are many people who are not informed. There are many people who didn't read medical books for several years. They don't understand this complex system of our metabolism. I mean, in my CLDs, I simplify it a lot. I don't look into the very specific pathways, but I make it available for the public. And whenever people don't understand this, and they have elevated cortisol levels, and everybody now has, it's even if it's not stress, even if you're not afraid of the virus, you're afraid of your future. Will I still have my job in a bit? Will I still be able to see my family? Will I still be able to travel? Will I be able to leave the house? Will democracy maintain? People are afraid. I'm afraid. You're probably afraid. Everybody's afraid. And what we can see, or what we know from the past, from many studies, is that elevated cortisol levels increase mortality. And we see is an increase in mortality. Then, of course, what scientists would do is, okay, where does this mortality come from? Was it the virus? Were there other factors? Were the factors maybe stress? Was it because we don't eat healthy? Was it because all the sport clubs and gyms are closed? This is not a very big issue. Is it because we decreased our social contact? There are studies that show that old people, when they can't have any more social contact, they die much earlier. So is it that because we can't visit the older people anymore? I don't know. I really don't know, but this needs to be discussed, and this needs to be discussed on a fair level, and this is not taking place. But what we know is the data. We know, for example, that people with COVID die with 80 years, and people without with 80 years too. So what we saw during the pandemic of the Spanish flu is that people had a life expectancy of 56, and they died with 28 on average. And right now it's 80 and 80. So this is also another number which is not mentioned. Of course, this should be questioned. Even if I say it now, it's like, I looked it up, I looked up myself and I was getting the data. People should question it and then talk about this and discuss it. I mean, I didn't swallow the truth, but I'm looking into this and I'm willing to discuss it. But people usually just say, okay, let's look at the incidents, etc. But this is not the way to go. We have to see what are the factors which actually cause the increased mortality. There are many people who look into our demographics. So we have more older people right now. Of course, the mortality rate is increasing, and this is what generally can be seen, especially this year. But if we look at the last 20 years, the mortality rate, which we had during the worst pandemic in human history, is maybe below average. So there are many things which need to be discussed, but they are taboo.
Yeah,
and that's what I'm concerned about.
I'm concerned about that too, and you mentioned so many things there that I'd like to discuss a little bit further, particularly too, like the social isolation part, because we know that as you said, and maybe not everyone listening knows, but when you are socially isolated, then that can lower your immune system, correct? So
Yes.
obviously those people are going to get sicker. And then, just coming back to mental health a little bit as well. I mean, I know that there's a pretty famous Harvard study. It was like a 70-year study that they, examined like what influences, mental health the most. And it came down to relationships was number one more than anything. And obviously, people's relationships are being broken apart or torn apart because, they're not able to visit people, like we're not, it's very, very difficult right now, for example, to travel in Canada, province to province, you can kind of do it, but, going outside of Canada is very difficult. So there's a lot of people, who can't see their loved ones, can't see their friends and family, and they, obviously feel very, very isolated. And I'm sure that's, lowering their overall immune system. And then coming back to the cortisol as well, a lot of people don't realize that there's an inverse relationship between testosterone and cortisol. So, the higher your your cortisol goes, and the lower your testosterone. And testosterone is important for your overall well-being, your mood, your sex drive, your motivation, a lot of different things. So, I think there's some information that, again, like you just discussed, that's not being discussed in the media these days. And, those are some of the reasons why people are dying, and certainly why, why they're dying at the rate that they are. And it's because, we've taken away so many things that actually protects their mental health, and that also protects their immune system. And, getting back to the cortisol and how we can counteract that. Are there any, strategies that you have, or particular supplements that you recommend to people if they do have high cortisol levels? I know that some people use Relora is one that a lot of people have used to decrease cortisol. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, or familiar with any strategies that people might be eager to hear with regards to how they can decrease stress and decrease their levels of cortisol.
Yes. First of all, I want to add something to the social life. So what's happening right now is that governments are not just decreasing our social contacts, also that they divide us. I don't know any single family which is not in a very big fight right now, because there are always people in like families which are like, okay, they're totally extremistic. So all of my friends who question the story have issues with family members, even like mother, father, brother, sister. They're like, okay, I don't want to talk to you anymore, which is quite heavy. And of course, family are a closer social context. And if the society is divided that way and families are divided, then we are getting to a point which is very stressful for every individual. You also asked me about how you can reduce cortisol. So in order to reduce cortisol, you have to reduce stress. So you can do this, for example, by meditating. It doesn't have to be the Buddha style or the total crazy hippie style. Just meditating, just breathing, just thinking about non-thinking about anything, just trying to focus on yourself, focus on your breath. And this lowers the cortisol level in your body.
I use the Headspace app. I do 10 minutes.
Headspace is amazing. I just recommend, but there are many apps out there in different languages even. So that's very fine. Even the Headspace basic version, you don't need the pro version, it even gives you a very nice, a very nice intake. So that's a good thing to do, just like 5 minutes a day, and it really has scientific impact. Another thing is sports. Sports reduces stress a lot. And as we know, everything is closed right now, at least here in Europe. They even closed the mountain bike tracks because you could infect other people on the mountain bike, which you never see on the track. So yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, sports help. So I have a spare room here, and just when the pandemic started in March, I was getting myself a home gym just to be able to do my squats, etc. Because me without sports doesn't work, and we have a curfew, so you can't even go for a jog after I think 8 or 9 p.m. So it's a no-go. So if you work, I usually work late, and then like, hey, should I go for it? Oh, it's impossible. So many people have this problem, so they're limited. Another thing is sufficient sleep. Sufficient sleep is one of the most important issues. Get yourself a very good mattress. I think everybody of us spends 30-40% of the lifetime in the bed. Get yourself a good mattress and get sufficient sleep. The best to actually do is even take melatonin at night, because melatonin is a very strong antioxidant. It doesn't make you addicted. Many people think, oh, but it helps you to sleep, and I don't want to get addicted to this drug, but it's not a drug. It's a hormone, and it just supports you falling asleep. And they're very nice CBD melatonin combination products, which really give you an amazing sleep, and they really decrease your cortisol. Another thing is gut health. I mean, if we know that there's a dysbiosis, which means a unbalanced gut bacteria, so that you have more bad bacteria than good bacteria, it also increases the stress level. And this can be counted. Actually, it causes inflammations, and inflammations cause immune response, and this increases cortisol. So this can be tackled by simple ways. For example, having a very good ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids in your food. So I think now the typical Western diet, and I mean in Northern America, it's much worse than in Europe. I think right now is 30-1 omega-3 to omega-6 to omega-3. But good would be between 3-1 to 1-1. So eating like wild-caught fish, wild-caught salmon is a very good thing, or shrimps. Grass-fed cattle, grass-fed beef is very good, and less industrial food, because these animals who just eat soy and GMO stuff, they have a very bad impact on that. And also using vegetable oils doesn't help. So I just cook with coconut oil, and I use hemp oil. I think this wheat oil, not CBD oil, but hemp oil. I think it is. Huh?
Yeah, I think that from my understanding, you might know a little bit about this, Simon. I think the only two oils that are safe to cook with are coconut, which you mentioned. And I think
Yeah.
macadamia nut is too. I think the boiling point to that is also
Butter. Just use
or butter.
butter.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But for salad, I use hemp oil and I use olive oil, which are both great.
Right.
And linseed oil is fine too.
Which is a good point too to make, because we know that olive oil actually oxidizes pretty quickly. So it's not good to actually cook with olive oil. It's good to ingest it at room temperature, like on like a salad, or if you want to put it in like your shake, or if you really want to go crazy and just kind of do a mouthful of it, don't know how desperate you are to get your olive oil, then those are the best ways to get it. But yeah, I mean, you hear people talk about olive oil all the time, and I think that people think that that means it's safe to cook with, but no, it gets oxidized, very, very easily, and can actually be harmful for your health.
It turns into trans fats. It's a misconception. People are like, okay, what do you cook with? Olive oil, super healthy, but no, the opposite the case. So coconut oil is fine. Even red palm tree oil from Africa. But red palm tree oil is a different one. It's red palm tree oil. If you buy the organic version, you don't have to worry about the environment, because I think it's sustainably produced, and I think mostly in Ghana, but I'm really not up to date. So you can also use this. It has a specific taste, but I like it a lot. I like it a lot with meat. So people should feel free to do this. But this is something to know. Also, what's very, very important, what people often don't think about, that probiotics are a very smart tweak in order to improve your gut health. So we talk about kombucha, which is a fermented green tea. It tastes like lemonade, but just like a soda. It's just a pop. I don't know what you call it, like soda pop, lemonade. Just and super healthy. you can give it your own taste. You can brew it with berries and other fruits, and it's just increased your gut health a lot. It contains lactobacteria and many others. I just wrote a review paper on this, and it's now in peer review. It just shows you all the bacteria and all the vitamins which are in kombucha, and I can just recommend to everybody to start brewing kombucha. Or just like what you told me before, you make your own sauerkraut. So do I. It's super, super simple. It just costs you maybe $1 to make a half a kilo, and it's super tasty. You can give it your own taste. You can put pineapple to it in a second fermentation, etc. It's a super easy thing to do. It's nutritious, and it really increases your mood, and it reduces by reducing your cortisol levels.
And it's as we are talking about too, I mean, your gut health is so good for your immune system, and I believe I'm correct when I say that about 70% of your immune system is in your gut. Is that correct, Simon?
Yeah, I think there are many sources. Some say 70, some say up to 85.
Okay.
But yeah, there's also this gut-brain axis. So the health of your gut determines your mood.
Yes.
So it's very important to have a healthy gut.
Yeah, and I think that in mental health in general, that's something that's like often missed. Like we discuss neurotransmitters and serotonin all the time, which obviously very, very important. But something that's missed is a lot of times is your gut health, and again, easy ways to increase your or improve your gut health are to add fermented foods like sauerkraut, like kimchi, and like myself, like what I do with my sauerkraut most of the time is I just put it in a shake, because that way you can ingest a lot of it fairly quickly, and it's just kind of an easy way to kind of get it in your system, so to speak. So happy that we chatted about that today. And then you also too, there's an interesting graph that you showed me earlier today. A lot of my listeners do use cannabis, and I know that you've done a little bit of research on how cannabis can influence our physiology. So if you could just briefly touch on that, and why you think that cannabinoids play an important role in our physiology and our health.
Yes. So what I mainly read about was CBD oil, because here in the Netherlands, CBD is a big thing. And I even make my own CBD oil. So I usually have my own 3 plants, which are allowed, pure CBD plants. I let them grow and I make my own oil. Huh? And so what the oil does, it fights candida. So if people have candida, which is like some kind of yeast which overpopulates your gut, and which is mainly caused by sugar consumption, which should be limited to 8 grams per day, by the way. And what it also does, the CBD oil, is, for example, that that lipopolysaccharides don't get that easy into your bloodstream, which again avoids having inflammations in your body and that way decreases stress. But there are many more pathways that CBD has, but I didn't look into all of them. I just know I take my 10 milligrams of CBD oil per day and I feel great. So this is what it does to me, yes.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, I take CBD oil myself. I find that it just, it can help definitely, decrease overall inflammation. It's amazing for muscle spasms if you're having like a spasm or some type of, not like, it does help with chronic pain and significant pain at times, but definitely like just like post workout with soreness. A lot of people will say that it definitely helps. So I'm a big believer in CBD oil, and it's helped a lot of my patients. So I'm sure they're very happy to hear that it can help with their gut health. So that's excellent. But one thing too, I know we only have probably 15 or 20 minutes left, but I wanted to pick your brain a little bit, so to speak, on the vaccines and what you think about that right now, because there's a lot of people in Canada who are pro-vaccine, and there's a lot of people, who are kind of scared because, the vaccine was, developed a lot quicker than, vaccines, typically are. Just kind of wondering, like, what's the consensus over in Netherlands right now, and what are people feeling, and are they trusting of the vaccines, or are they a little bit skeptical?
So it's not my scientific field, so I'm as new to vaccines as most of you probably. But from a scientific point of view, it's very concerning that an experimental drug is pushed to the whole global population. So these vaccines, which are mostly mRNA vaccines, they're totally new. They have hardly been tested on animals, and now it looks like that we are somehow test subjects. I don't want to say that they don't work. I mean, there's some indications that they might increase mortality and that they might have many adverse effects. But what I'm saying is all the money they have now put into vaccines to protect those who are vulnerable to the virus, who are mainly obese people. Why wasn't this money put into our general health? Be this high tax on sugars, information campaigns, maybe even having personal support for people who are obese, getting them a free pass, or like a free entry for gyms, etc. So I think with the money, you could have created much better stuff, which would increase the general health of the global population way more than the measures and the vaccines. So we know that I think 80% of the whole global population are deficient in vitamin D. And we talk about deficient as the WHO defines deficient, less than 20 nanograms per milliliter, which is super deficient. And I would say everything above 35, 40 is sufficient. So why is the money put into a drug which has hardly been tested and which just makes big pharma richer? So there's one take from Germany. There was a professor who developed his own vaccine. It's not an mRNA vaccine, it's an old vaccine, like old style vaccine with dead virus particles, which obviously worked. So he tested it on himself and all his employees, and they did an antibody study, and it was all fine. There were hardly any complications. And you would think usually that the government would be like, "Way, nice! You created a vaccine for free." And he even said like, "Hey, I wanna give the recipe to all of you. We can solve this problem right away with COVID without using experimental drugs." But no, what happened? The German state sued him. So they sued him for creating this vaccine, having tested it on people, even though there was a consensus between him and the people. So this is highly concerning. I can send you the link. It's in German. I can even download the video, and which was in general news on a general news channel with subtitles. It's just super scary. To me, it looks like their main pharma players, which is Pfizer, which is Johnson & Johnson, which will be probably Bayer as well, BioNTech, which is kind of they're working together with Pfizer, Moderna, etc. And most of them never have created a vaccine before, or never have worked even with coronavirus vaccines. And these players are now trying to vaccinate the whole world. But instead, we should talk about holistic approaches. We shouldn't talk about, hey, how can we achieve herd immunity with an experimental drug? I mean, herd immunity is until 2020 was created by people getting sick once, and then they are kind of immune. And what we know also is that coronaviruses, they don't mutate that heavily like the influenza. So the influenza is mutating much more than coronaviruses. So there are scientists who think that, okay, once you've had corona, and I've had corona, and to me, it was like a common cold. Of course, I'm healthy, I'm young. I don't want to say it's generally a common cold, but to me, it was like a common cold. And they say, hey, you might be immune for 20 or 30 years. So for me, it's the risks, of getting a vaccine are much higher than getting a shot every 6 months. That's what they're discussing now. Every 6 months, you need an update of this shot, just like Windows operation system. Always a new update. Always a new update. So as I'm not part of the risk group, I would prefer to just get sick. I got sick. I mean, not really sick, but I mean, I got it. And I don't understand why it can't be voluntary. Just like with the influenza. If people think, hey, I really want this experimental vaccine, then they should take it, and it's fine. But right now, what we are observing is that they're pushing it on us, and that we are most likely be forced to take it. Now they say, oh, conspiracy theorists, but I mean, all these conspiracy theories are coming true. So I'm daring to say this. So I'm really afraid of this obligatory vaccine, of the passport, of the tracking wherever we are. To me, this is no good solution, and it just makes things worse. It's not about our health.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I know that there's at least one study that shows that once you get COVID and recover, you're immune for at least 8 months. But it could be much longer. They only said in the study that it was 8 months because that's how long it had been tested. COVID has only been around or been studied anyway for 14, maybe 15 months maximum. So we really don't know how long that immunity lasts for. And from my understanding too, like you had said, that a lot of people don't realize there's actually 7 different coronaviruses, and COVID is just one of them. SARS-CoV-2, SARS-CoV-1 was hit us, I guess fairly hard in Ontario in probably 2006, but it was also fairly well contained, and it didn't really spread very much, just because the nature of the virus was a lot different. It wasn't as transmittable, and it was more deadly. So the host kind of got killed off before passing it on. But there does seem to be a lot of cross reactivity between being able to recover from one coronavirus and then being able to use those same antibodies if you get a different coronavirus. And, you know, again, like that's not really discussed. And that's the problem too. If like, you know, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, like something like polio, like it's great. Like you get the vaccine
Yeah,
and then
it's
you don't have
perfect.
to worry
Yes.
about it. Like you don't have to avoid, you know, drinking out of fountain or whatever after you get the polio vaccine. Like you
But
get,
there are no experimental drug, you know, that's the difference. They
yeah,
have been tested,
exactly.
and we are still in the testing phase. This is what I'm concerned about. It's about ethics.
Yes. And how long, like generally speaking, it's about 10 years before a vaccine is tested before it goes to trial. And, you know, for these vaccines, like it's literally been less than a year. And I
Yes.
mean, I remember even Dr. Fauci said, you know, when Trump was saying, you know, we're going to have a vaccine by, you know, 2021 or, you know, he was kind of saying like, that's not possible. It's not how vaccines work. And then all of a sudden, you know, here we are in 2021 and everyone's just, you know, jumping on the vaccine, getting the vaccine. And again, you know, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I am very concerned about, you know, the timeline of this vaccine, how it was made so quickly and how it's being distributed so quickly. And again, too, you know, as you mentioned earlier about the mRNA, just because, you know, these vaccines were supposed to be, you know, brought to market before with some other, you know, viruses, and they never were because, you know, they couldn't get FDA approval and basically because they weren't working, they weren't effective, and they were, you know, causing some adverse effects. And the other, and you know, just one quick note too about the adverse effects. You know, I tweeted this out recently that there was a Harvard study that said that about 1% of people who get adverse reactions from vaccines actually report them. And you know, I discussed this with my, you know, my girlfriend last night, and she's a nurse, and like she got the flu shot, I think it was last year or the year before, and like for 6 weeks she had like a migraine, but like she didn't report that. You know what I mean? And I mean, there's lots of other people that I think, you know, also get, you know, side effects that might be, you know, fairly mild in nature, you know, whether it's, although I wouldn't really consider having a migraine for 6 weeks mild, but, you know, that do get, you know, milder-ish, you know, symptoms, and they're underreported, unfortunately.
But yes, but then we need to talk about a risk assessment. Maybe for older people who are older than 80, for them, it might work in case the vaccine works, which we will maybe know in 1 or 2 years. But
Yeah.
if they want to take the risk, they should. But why should young and healthy people like us, or even children or toddlers, why should they be injected with an experimental drug? And this is an ethical problem, you know? They even now say, hey, this vaccine, if you take it, you still might be able to transmit the virus. You still might have it. You still need to wear the mask. You still need to get into self-quarantine. So why taking the vaccine? So there is no story which actually can convince me or many others to take it. And that's why we can see this heavy PR campaign. It's not just the vaccine. If there was really a pandemic which was super deadly, people would queue to take the vaccine. But right now, at least those who are informed, and I don't see it, they say, hey, the risk is too high. And I think everybody should be able to make their own decision. If I want to take the vaccine, I go there, I take it. If I don't want to take it, it's my right to say, no, I don't want to. And this is what our governments need to accept. And this is what the problem is, because they're pushing further and further and further. And at some point they say, hey, there's this passport. If you don't get it, you are not allowed to leave the house. You're not allowed to go to the gym. You're not allowed to leave the country, etc. They call the road to freedom, but it's no road to freedom. It's a road to fascism. And we have to be careful that we don't take that turn. And that's what I keep on saying. We have to be fair to each other. We have to discuss, but we shouldn't continue like we do it now, that there are some people who are up there who talk about others who are critical as a conspiracy theorist. They're dangerous to society. They, I don't know what kind of words you have for this over there, but here in Holland, they're called wappies. In Germany, they're called Querdenker, even though I'm also a bit critical regarding this movement. But still, I'm highly concerned about what's happening right now. and what might happen next, because we don't know.
Yeah, I'm completely against the vaccine passports, and I'm completely against the vaccine being mandatory. I think that people should have the right to refuse the vaccine if they want to. And there's plenty of evidence out there now. I mean, we discuss so many things in this podcast that can protect yourself from succumbing to COVID. Things like vitamin D, exercise, sleep, eating, a low sugar, low ultra processed diet. These are the really important things that are not being discussed. And also, as you said, that are not being funded. Like imagine if, the Canadian government or any government, was issuing, mandatory vitamin D instead of the vaccine. And, I always say to people too, I mean, I know that, I'm right on vitamin D and COVID, but even if I'm wrong, you know what, vitamin D is going to decrease your chance of the common upper respiratory tract infection. It's also going to, ensure that potentially your testosterone is optimized. There's evidence that low vitamin D is linked to low testosterone. That's also linked to depression. So, again, like even if I'm wrong, which, I don't think I am, you should be taking vitamin D anyway. And again, with everything else that we just said, you should be trying to sleep 7 to 8 hours a night because you're going to feel better physically. You're going to feel better mentally. It's going to decrease the rate of heart disease. There's a bunch of different reasons why, people should be following all of these measures, anyway. It's ridiculous that we have to, tell people to take, vitamin D, solely for COVID, because, people should be, taking vitamin D anyway. On that note, Simon, man, I would love to talk to you more, and people who are listening to this are probably, wishing that we could go on for a little bit longer, but
next episode, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, I do have to wrap things up, but I know that, already that you're going to be requested to come back on. So we're definitely going to have to do a round two at some point. But I know I talked a little bit about your Twitter handle there earlier, but if you can just tell Simon where people can find you, that'd be perfect.
So you can find me on Goddek et al., just like the scientific et al., which you always see. Maybe you can just write underneath your post. So that's maybe the easiest.
Sure. Okay, I'll do that. Well, Simon, thank you so much again for coming on. I really do appreciate it. And
thank you.
You have a wonderful day, and we'll definitely do this again soon.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Take care.